quiet.
But I'm actually wondering why it is that you think God has to use this mechanism, which to some of us appear to be nothing more than unfounded, irrational gullibility. Why can't, why is a Damascus...
You really want Lord Jesus Christ? I command you to give him your name.
road experience good enough for Saul, but the rest of us have to learn dead languages and study and take leaps of faith that aren't justified. Not that a leap of faith would be justified. I mean, why can't God just show up and say, "Hey, here I am. Here's who I am. This is what I want from you." Maybe He wants me to sing lots of songs about Him, or whatever. But I mean, I don't know why God can't just do that.
I think that's a very valid question, but the example I would go to is like, you ever seen that show Star Trek?
Every episode of every season of every version of Star Trek, yes.
Okay, so all right, so imagine a scenario similar to that where there's like a version, like a slip space area where someone has gotten trapped into, and they can't figure out how to get into it or get him out of it, or even know that he was there, and this person has found a way to communicate with the people in it. See, I have a different belief about God, probably a little bit different than my church, but I don't believe God is all-powerful and all-knowing, because that would be awfully inconsistent. So, I mean, you get the whole, can God create a rock so heavy you can't lift it?
Modern theologians don't hold to that definition of omnipotence. What they define God as being is maximally powerful, all-powerful that is logically possible.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that makes a lot more sense.
But the thing is that you seem to be kind of getting to this idea that God is somehow limited in how He can interact with us.
Yeah.
Why would God be limited in how He can interact with us when He's the one who created all of this in the first place? Why didn't He create a system in which He could actually interact with us? It seems absurd to me that He would create everything, stick me here with the pain, in a universe that operates under certain rules, to where this type of thinking leads to unreliable results and is therefore discouraged, and another type of thinking leads to reliable results and is therefore encouraged. And when it comes to the single most important question that one could ask, which is there a God? I'm expected to rely on the demonstrably unreliable method of thinking.
So, basically what I think is going on, okay, so I don't think God is all-knowing. I think He learns, and He adjusts His behavior according to what He thinks is best. And so I think everything He's done in the past has been a learning experience. And every time He has tried, like the Damascus Road experience result.
Do you think God has actually appeared to people and spoken with them?
Yes, in the past.
Okay, so this isn't about what He knows or what He's learning. I'm asking why He doesn't just do that.
What I'm saying is that He has learned that method is not effective as the method that He's
that's bullshit. I mean, I apologize for being so harsh, but that is absolute bullshit. That the idea that it could be more effective for God to not show Himself than to show Himself as a way of demonstrating that He exists is the single most absurd thing I've ever heard.
Wouldn't everybody believe in Him if He showed Himself?
Well, I don't think that He just wants everybody to know. I think there's a particular filter that He's trying to
okay, so He's picking and choosing. So He doesn't want to have a relationship with everybody, like you said before. He's got a select few people that He wants to have a relationship and screw the rest of us.
He wants them to come to Him.
Well, I don't care what He wants. Why should I care what He wants? Especially if He's not going to actually tell me that this is what He wants. You're just giving your opinion about what God wants. If this is what God wants, then why can't He relay that information to me? Because if He reveals Himself to me right now, That doesn't mean I'm automatically going to worship him or pay any attention to him or anything else.
I agree. And,
Okay.
If you don't care about what he has to offer, then I guess you have no incentive.
Well, I don't know what he has to offer. I don't know that he exists. So I can't know whether or not I care about it until I am given this information. I'm not just going to assume and take a leap of faith that there is some being out there whose interests I care about, who I need to have a relationship with, and then have to figure out exactly how to go about taking the steps to establish that relationship. That's not how you start a relationship.
Well, any relationship that you know of now. I mean,
Oh, okay. So now you're talking about a special type of relationship that's different from every other relationship. And so this special type of relationship is one that could be founded most reasonably on not even knowing that the other person exists.
I guess you could look at it that way. What I really think is going on, and what I think the biggest issue between atheists and theists, the issue that I come up when I talk to people who don't believe, is
it almost seems like we both have a presupposition, and that we've come to a parting of ways, and
Yes.
where you don't see the importance of an incentive as like the afterlife because you don't see evidence for such.
No, I did not. I have not rejected the incentive of an afterlife. I don't think that there is an afterlife because I haven't seen sufficient evidence for it. If I did, that would be the point at which I would and should believe. You shouldn't believe anything until there's evidence for it.
The evidence that I would point to, you would find some reason to not accept that evidence.
Okay, you're probably right that I would have a reason, but when you phrase it as find some reason, you're implying that I have some bias against this, and therefore I will invent a reason. You've already acknowledged every time that I've offered an objection to your epistemological foundation that my objections are valid.
I agree with you that your objections have been valid so far, and I don't mean to insinuate that you would be looking for a fault.
I mean, you do know that I was a Southern Baptist fundamentalist Christian for more than 25 years and was going to be a preacher, right?
I am aware of that.
Okay. So, and I didn't give it up because I got mad at God or because anything went wrong or that anybody died or anything else. I just learned more, and I wanted to demonstrate the truth of what I believe. And not to pick on you, but like you, I kept failing to demonstrate the truth. And then I realized that without sufficient foundation, my beliefs couldn't possibly be justified. And therefore, I gave them up. And it wasn't like a voluntary choice to give them up. I just simply could not believe them anymore. They vanished because they don't have any sound basis.
So, someone like me, I'm 30 years old. I've been in this church for years. If I agree with you on everything that you have said, and like I'm supposed to just give up everything that I've been doing and the members of my church and just stop going. And what do I do after that? I mean, where do I go?
You live life free from the shackles of religion and false beliefs.
I mean, I don't necessarily see it as shackles. I mean, I see it as friends and family and closeness and groups and fun.
And yes, and you get to keep all of that, by the way, because I have family and closeness and groups and fun. I just am not donating my time and money to propositions that are not true and supporting religious beliefs that I find to be harmful and in some cases counterproductive to progress. You know, there were religions who, I don't know what your particular religion stand is on anything, but there are people fighting for marriage equality, and religions are standing in the way for that. There are people working on stem cell research and other things like that religion is standing in the way of. The Catholic Church opposes contraceptives, that is increasing the spread of AIDS in Southern Africa and places like that. There's countless problems that are spawned by false beliefs or beliefs that haven't been demonstrated to be true. And I get to keep all of the true beliefs. I gave up nothing that was clearly true when I left religion. Now, there is a risk, though. There is a risk that you will no longer have your family and social structure because those people's minds are still polluted by religion that prevents them from carrying on a relationship with you because you're a non-believer. That is the risk. And that is not your fault, and nor is it theirs. They are victims as well. But it is an example of how religion poisons people's minds and breaks their moral compass, such that mothers and fathers will disown children for not believing what they believe. How is that love?
You have very valid points on almost every accord that you address.
Well, thanks.
It's difficult for me because I've been doing this my whole life, and I thought I had answers, or I could refute your point, and I feel like I'm hitting a wall, and it makes me think, it gives me the feeling that you either are prepared for this type of responses, and you've thoroughly thought out the proper, it almost makes me think that you're either one, being dishonest, which I'm not trying to imply.
No, I understand.
Okay, it either makes me think you're being dishonest and that you're purposely it's like
the truth, Brian, and this isn't meant in any condescending way at all. I was exactly where you were at about the same age that you are. I was desperate to find and prove that what I believed was true, that it was rational, that I had good reasons for it, and I found that I was wrong. And then I spent a number of years kind of floundering about, thinking about these topics and engaging, and then I've been doing this on a TV show for 10 years, or almost 10 years. Wow, that's a long time. and so yes, I have thought these things through, and I have responses to a number of things. The great thing on your part is that, unlike some other people that we'll engage with, you're willing to acknowledge when you don't have an answer and when somebody else's answer is better. It seems to me that the difficulty is just the kind of fear of letting go of what happens if I acknowledge that I don't believe this anymore. And that's not a trivial fear. There's a reason why there are groups like Recovering from Religion, and the Secular Therapist Project. There's the Secular Safe Zone for teenagers and school kids, because we don't live in a world where you're free of risk for being a non-believer and for expressing this. I hear from people all the time in email who are going through custody battles because they both entered a relationship as believers. They have kids. Now one of them doesn't believe, and now they're going to get divorced, or their family has kicked them out. We hear these stories all the time. And in every single instance, what it demonstrates to me is that the religion that they're coming out of is not anything that is good, loving, holy, no matter what they've been taught week in and week out. It is an insular environment where the love is conditional both from the God and from the people that you're surrounded by. And I'm not advocating for unconditional love. I think all love is conditional.
I was about to.
Yeah. I'm not advocating for that at all. But the conditions upon which that love is based is irrational. Basically, there's this idea that God wants you to do things His way without ever offering any justification. And if you don't do it, well, then He's going to either torture you forever or annihilate you or whatever. None of that. That's not the way we would treat people. If you want a relationship, as I said at the beginning, none of the steps that this, and actually the entire book, the entire Bible is like a comedy of God's figures showing how inept He is at everything. He creates the Garden of Eden, sticks two people in there, it goes wrong. Okay, let's start over. Now things keep getting worse and worse, and now I'm going to pick a family of 8. I'm going to kill off everybody because that's the best solution I can come up with. And now that I have this family of 8 who's devoted to me, surely things will go right. And then it goes wrong. And within a couple hundred years, they're building a tower to heaven. And though He demolishes it and sends them off on their way and muddles their languages, which isn't how language is formed, and it continues like that, on and on and on. It's a comedy of failures to the point where He's just, now let me pick this specific tribe of people, and I'm going to sanction all kinds of immoral things like slavery and the subjugation of women, and we're going to keep on doing this. And then there's a gap where nothing happens, and then He comes down in human form to sacrifice Himself to Himself to act as a loophole for rules that He made. None of that makes any sense. None of it represents anything that's good. It's not rational. It's not loving. It's not anything I would want a part of.
Really, you leave me almost speechless with everything you say, but I know you gotta go. But there's one thing that I gotta. Okay, I want to believe you, but don't. I have this. I understand. Yeah, I've heard you make that point before. I have this nagging.
I don't know how to describe it. It makes me think basically what I've been taught is that you're trying to trick me.
Yeah.
And that like you're working for the devil or something.
Yeah.
And that your purpose is to convince me that I'm wrong.
Yes. I understand that that's the case. My parents, by the way, think I'm working for the devil. They still love me because they know I'm a decent person. I don't know how they reconcile it. That's their business. But yeah, they're convinced that I'm working for the devil. I don't believe in him either. And I don't see no reason to believe that that's the case. But like I've said before, don't believe me. I mean, think about this, investigate it, find out, do you have any good reason? And if you don't, you know, like I said, it's not an easy thing for a lot of people. But my motivation is not to debunk Christianity or Islam or any religion. My motivation is to engage on the topics and find out what is rational to believe and what isn't. I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. And if I'm just trying to trick you, what does that say about your God? That he is unable to demonstrate the truth of his existence, to demonstrate the veracity of claims about him, to provide you with an understanding and a capacity to engage on these, such that some yahoo on a public access TV show out of Texas can keep raising all these questions, and your only concern is he trying to trick me or not? I mean, why doesn't your God come in to offer some kind of comfort and say, no, that person's clearly trying to trick you, my child? It didn't happen for me. If it happens for you, I'd love to hear about it, but I don't hear that from anybody.
Okay, well, you've given me quite a lot to think about. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Brian.
I applaud Brian for being willing to examine this stuff and think about it. We don't want you to follow us any more than we want you to follow something else blindly. But just think about it. Think about what you believe and why. And I'm glad that you're willing to engage with us, and we don't need any followers.
But see,
like
this
Matt
is
said,
this is how I know I'm a stupid ass fucking genius, yo. Well, not really. That's a weird phrase, but I don't know. I don't consider myself very smart in a lot of intellectual fields or areas. Like, a lot of shit just escapes me, boggles the mind. But for some reason, and I was heavily indoctrinated with Christianity, Baptist, just like Matt. I was a Southern Baptist, like hardcore indoctrination from a very young age, And I can honestly say, I swear to God, that's such a weird phrase too, that I never believed it. I don't know, it was something about religion and the stories they told, and that's what I thought they were, just like stories. But I never could, like, believe that what they were saying was actually true and possible. I don't know, just from me. And that's the weird thing too. Some people will say, just look at the world. Just look at the fucking birds in the trees. Man, that shit should tell you there's a fucking God. Look at you. And you should know that God made you just by looking at it and seeing the complexity of everything, the intricate design and perfect symmetry, the way things fit together and how the world works. That's proof of God. And it's like, I never thought that way. I always thought the world was fucking fascinating. My first fascination was insects. Yeah, I'm a boy, I guess, and boys like bugs, I guess, I don't know. But to see these little tiny creatures live a complete life and understand rules and structure, and especially like ants who are able to build and colonize and communicate, and like, that was fascinating to me, yo. Like, entomology or whatever. Not entomology, but what's the study of insects? Anyway, but at a young age, like observing the magnificent things about life and existence, it just still never like, oh, that's because God made it like that. So notice his color is mainly all dark toned because that's how the photograph is. Because it's the photo, bro. You're all cowards with no backbone. Okay. Yeah, and the pale is very colorful. Very, very colorful, not dark tone. What the fuck are you talking about? The color is in the center. Whatever, bro. I'm the one who is sharing magnificent with my magnificent talent with complete strangers. But I'm a coward. I'm a coward. I dedicate hours of my life to study and understanding images that fascinate the human psyche. That's why you're so captivated by my art. That's why you can't leave my stream. That's why You want me to acknowledge your existence. You want me to respond to you. But I'm a coward. You don't see the irony in you just telling me that. Like, it's so ironic for you to even make such a statement. The irony is laughable. No, you don't see the irony in this? That I am not entering your world. You're entering my world and objecting to it, and then telling me that you're objecting to it when no one invited you here. There was no invitation for you here. And then at the same time, in my world, I'm a master painter. I'm a master painter, and you're a nobody. But then you want to come into the world of the master painter uninvited and criticize him about his craft. And I'm the coward? Oh. Yes, 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 yes. This dude truly has no sense of self-awareness. What the fuck? Or what the fuck he's actually saying, or who he's actually saying it to. I gotta do something real quick. Oh shit. Oh shit. Don't knock the door.
Leave him just because he says it.
Because I'm wrong a lot.
Yeah. Well, we all are. We're fallible.
Yeah, it's one of the things that's kind of come up as frustration is, oh, that's stupid, that's idiotic. And the fact is, we're all stupid, we're all idiotic about something at some point. The goal is to get less stupid and less idiotic with increasingly. Anyway. Whoop, there we go. I lost that one. And Matt and Austin, thanks for waiting.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, sorry for that. That took a lot longer than I thought.
Yeah, I didn't really get the atheist or religious issue that was being.
I didn't
Yeah.
either. There's a
there's-
fundamental thing about morality that kind of got lost in there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so it seemed like earlier you guys were at one point saying that, you know, if you're silent about if you're Catholic and you're silent about the cover up or the people shielding these abusers, then you're complicit. But then a couple of times y'all also said that if you continue to be, I'm sorry, who's the other host that I've met? Is it
Jen.
This is Jen.
Jen, okay. I think right as y'all were finishing that up, Jen said, but if you continue to be in the church, then you're complicit. And I think that those seem to be kind of, those are definitely two different things.
Really?
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're in the Catholic Church and you're a member of a church and you're supporting the church and you're aware of what they're doing that is immoral and criminal, how are you not complicit by continuing to contribute and support that organization?
Well, I would say that in the sense that I would think that every example where you're a member of an organization, it's doing something that is bad, that by supporting the organization in general, that you're supporting that thing, especially if you're
Yes, you are.
If you know about it.
I mean, if it doesn't,
So what is so?
if an organization has done something and is continuing to do something that is immoral and illegal, and you're aware of it, and you continue to support that organization, then you are supporting that organization. I mean, that if you support the organization, you're supporting it.
And
Okay,
that's why I don't
well-
support cops.
Okay, so if I'm in the Army and the Army is doing something that I don't believe, or if the leadership, one aspect of what they're doing is something that I don't agree with, then by being part of the organization in general, I'm complicit in that?
You might be, but there's a fundamental difference between being in the military and being a member of a church. If you don't want to
Okay.
be a member of a church anymore, you can walk out the door and stop supporting them. If you're in the military, you can't just walk off the job.
I'm
When
Catholic.
you join the military, you fundamentally give up rights and freedoms
Yeah.
as a consequence of doing that. You don't have the freedom to just say, nope, screw this, I'm done with this. Whereas you can do that with like church membership.
Now,
Well, it's illegal. It's illegal, but you could do it.
well, but the point is, one thing that you can do, if you're in the military and you are given what you consider to be an illegal order, you have an obligation to refuse that order and to accept whatever consequences come along with that. If you accept the illegal order and you carry out that illegal action, then yes, you're complicit in that.
And when your time is up, you don't have to re-enlist. You
That's
can
right.
then get out. But what we're talking about with someone who continues to support the Catholic Church organization, if you're going to try to make a valid analogy in the military, that would be someone who continues to keep re-enlisting and supporting what they're opposed to.
Yeah.
Okay, but I think that Jim saying, if you get an order, I think that's different than somebody at a much higher level than you in the Army carrying out
Sure.
something that's, doing
Right.
something that's wrong.
Sure.
But the other thing too is if some senior officer is doing something illegal and you know about it, and you do nothing about that, and you continue to follow this guy, then you're complicit in whatever that guy's doing.
And
Absolutely.
depending on what it is, you could find yourself responsible
Exactly.
and you
I
can
agree.
charge as well.
And so this is what we're talking about with the Catholic Church. There's the church hierarchy has spent a lot of time and money moving priests around after they've committed crimes against children.
Right.
They've engaged in an organized conspiracy to make sure these guys never suffered any legal consequences for what they've done to children.
Right.
They've done this at the expense of those children many times.
Sure.
okay? And you're still in that organization, you still support that.
Yeah, I'm still in the organization, but I'm completely critical openly of all that kind of thing.
Okay,
So,
so what are you doing to be openly critical of the criminal actions of the church that you're supporting?
oh, well, just making it difficult, for one thing, for any Catholics that I know who want to somehow smooth it over or kind of minimize it or, otherwise kind of pretend it's not happening, make it very difficult for them. I mean, but I think that I think the media and the authorities are doing a pretty good job of taking care of it otherwise.
No, see, that's part of the problem. So the Catholic Church has done a good job of skirting prosecution, and the authorities have been, for years, until it became a huge scandal, reluctant to go after the church at all.
Sure, but I mean now.
So now, you're a Catholic. Do you attend a church regularly?
Yeah.
Do you give money to it?
Yeah, sometimes.
Okay. Why?
Well, usually I give money to there's different collections. The one I usually give is to for the poor, and I give to the St. Vincent de Paul.
How do you know that's where the money's going?
I'm absolutely certain that it is.
Yeah.
It could be going to drugs.
Yeah, it could be.
But I honestly don't think it is.
Well, here's the thing. Churches don't have to open up their financial records to the public. There's no auditing at all. So even charities, non-religious charities,
The ACA, for example.
they not only do they have to open up their books, but if you look at it, they'll tell you how much of each dollar goes to what it's supposed to be going to. And so there are some absolutely horrible charities out there where less than a penny or two of every dollar you give goes to the actual people who need it, and the rest is taken up in administrative costs.
Yeah.
If that's the case for organizations that have to open their books, what's happening with the organizations that don't have to open their books?
Well, yeah, it's anybody's guess.
Now, it is anybody's guess, I suppose. We'd like to just generally think that this is a trustworthy organization that gets kind of the benefit of the doubt because religions have had this position. What if it turns out that the organization you're giving money to is known to have engaged in criminal actions and has been incredibly untrustworthy when it comes to their transgressions?
Well,
How much confidence do you have that the money you're giving is going where you think it goes now?
I still do. In other words, so let me be clear. I understand, obviously we all know what you're referring to, and I understand that those things exist, but I still make a judgment about whether, most of the support I do is for my local church. And also, I've been getting
Your local church doesn't give money to the
Hyundai Tucson versus Nissan Rogue. Hyundai Tucson wins every time.
Hey, Jonathan, how you doing?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Pretty good.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask you a question about the way that atheists use the word faith in discussions with Christians. And it seems to me that Christians and people of other religious persuasions are using that word in a different way from the way that atheists typically represent the word. And so the way I would represent the word faith is more than simply intellectual assent to a set of propositional claims, but actually trusting or putting one's commitment in that to which you've already assented. So the word faith.
This episode is brought to you by Wold Anvil. Many of us dread a future in which we don't have any money. But that might not feel so bad, actually, as long as the rest of the world doesn't need any money either. So a topic that comes up a lot in discussion of the future is what the economy might look like and how money might change in the future, or if it has any role at all. A look at a future without money is probably one of our most requested topics from both advocates and detractors of the idea. So we try to address all that today and not ask ourselves if a society without money is good or not, or is just possible or not, but how it might come about and function. As we do in our Alien Civilization series, where we take a hypothetical type of civilization and ask if a scenario makes sense or how it might exist. Needless to say, this is a touchy topic, and I'll do my best to present it neutrally. Where money is concerned, the reason people hope it might cease to exist is usually the easiest part. A lot of folks feel money is bad in and of itself, or at least that's a poor choice of life goal, or becomes the life goal of far too many people. Of course, they say money is the root of all evil, except they actually do not say that. The quote is from the Apostle Paul and is in Greek, so translations vary. But the original is the love of money, specifically calling out greed, not the concept of currency. And it isn't all evil, but all kinds of evil. This seems like an important distinction to make, since if we're assuming money is the root of all evil, then we must get rid of it. Whereas if we're saying greed for wealth spawns a lot of bad things, then our focus is more on ridding ourselves of a behavior manifested around a tool, not the tool. That's not unique either, and it comes up in regard to a lot of future technologies or challenges. We often worry about how to handle poorly understood, potentially dangerous new technology that might end world hunger, or might bring about the apocalypse, or both. Whether it's the pen or the sword, money or guns, axe or keyboard, many tools tend to have large amounts of bad behavior manifested around them, and it would be equally overly simplistic to say either the tool isn't to blame or remove the tool and the problem goes away. Obviously, an inanimate physical object cannot be blamed for anything. You decide how to use a knife or a dollar bill. But it would also be dishonest to pretend they don't affect us. In an obvious and extreme case, we know that strong addictive narcotics can affect our behavior and decisions in ways we won't have the strength to control, so most of us voluntarily decide to keep them out of our own reach, and there's at least a case to be made for keeping out of everyone else's as well. Once you've done that, it's legitimate to at least examine the question of what else society might be better off finding a way to live without. Such a civilization might decide it needs to do without other advantages, like people being born attractive or smarter than others, rather than born to a wealthier family. And they might be able to do that too, setting everyone to the same high IQ or attractiveness, or permitting variety in both but scoring it, like the point buy system many role-playing games use for character building. You make a character and assign more points to intelligence or charisma or physical strength and so on. That is not specifically pertinent to a lack of money, but it's important to ask why or how a civilization has done away with money, or maybe never had it in the first place, and that might lead to a pursuit of parallel concepts. They probably would have the cybernetic and genetic technology to make folks smarter or stronger or better looking, and also probably to alter people's thinking so that they just weren't greedy, or weren't heavily impacted by other people's looks or charisma. Or they could approach the problem from the other end and alter people's thinking so they're no longer bothered by inequality. That's a bit of a frightening idea, to say the least, and it dovetails into one of our favorite sinister concepts on the channel, the post-discontent civilization, in which everyone has been made content through neurohacking, whatever their workload or social status. They live in a slum when not working 16-hour shifts, and they're perfectly content with that. But even if our hypothetical enlightened civilization just sticks with doing away with money, we need to ask what they are replacing money with, because they probably do need an accounting system. Your civilization might have such abundance that food, water, shelter, medicine, computers, jetpacks, and flying cars are all too trivially easy to get for anyone to bother selling them. They may have local councils that vote on what to do if someone asks for something atypically big, like a house made of solid platinum, or who controls a finite and locked resource like a particular parcel of land. They may pool resources to build megastructures the size of continents, but all this still needs to be accounted for and prioritized. Let's pause to ponder exactly what we mean by that, money as a tool for accounting and prioritizing. Imagine for a moment that you are the enlightened organizer of all production for an enlightened, non-greedy, but still productive civilization. And let's start with a simple problem, like how much steel your society should produce next year, and of what types. Well, your upper limit would be your maximum physically possible steel production, a limit that could be set by a number of factors, including the number and size of foundries, the amount of iron ore coming from mines, and scrap steel coming back from old projects. or the amount of energy available to melt all that metal and operate those foundries. Indeed, it could include devoting huge portions of your other resources to ramping up steel production as a crash project if you suddenly need a few trillion tons more. However, it is unlikely you'll run every industry at maximum capacity every year, so you need to figure out how much steel you really need. You'll probably figure this out by breaking it down by product. How many steel ball bearings, razor blades, hood springs, harvester blades, deck plates, helicopter engine blocks, 2-inch nails, and steel cable does your society need next year? So you start with the first item on your long list, ball bearings. So you probably need bicycles, water pumps, wood lathes, and fan motors you'll need bearings for. How many bicycles you need is an even more complex question. And I'm sure you see where this is going. You would need unfathomable amounts of up-to-date data about every detail of our economy before you could even begin to develop fair methods to deciding if one person's need for a bicycle outweighs another person's need for
third time
razor
he comes in here just.
or how to prioritize one city's need for sewer grades versus a farm's need for harvester blades.
He says my art is crap all the time and I'm a
The
coward.
manpower necessary to gather all that data and make all those micromanaging decisions. Neither have we talked about how much energy the steel industry even gets next year, since the food, manufacturing, and military sectors need energy too. Oh, and all this comes after you've somehow made your subjects not greedy and your legions of bureaucrats incorruptible. And we can't just dismiss this concern by saying that money will go away when we're post-scarcity and there are no more such conflicts over resources, because even in a post-scarcity society, demand for goods may rise until there may be such conflicts again. We always say on the show that the sky is not the limit, and people can dream big, like terraforming or building entire worlds simply to allow it to be used as a nature preserve. And untangling this sort of mess is exactly what money is handy for. If that ball bearing industry outbids the engine block manufacturers for the available steel, that can be viewed as a tacit decision on society's part that ball bearings are needed more at this time than additional engine blocks. And if the steel industry buys up all the energy and leaves less for agriculture, food prices will rise, presumably, until agribusiness can buy up more energy and a new temporary balance or equilibrium is achieved. It's a far from perfect system that gets priorities backwards quite often. But it spares us needing that vast army of intrusive data gatherers and micromanagers. Such data gathering or micromanaging might be done anyway, but money is the default way of doing this. Now, the two common objections I and others often make to hypothetical moneyless societies is that frequently folks achieve this moneyless society on paper by either utterly ignoring gaping flaws, plot holes, or issues with their concept, or by basically just renaming money, such as your VR or holodeck time.
They were?
As an example, having some ration tokens of post-scarcity everybody got that you could apply to atypical acquisitions, things beyond normal need for living comfortably, is not the same thing as money, but mostly in that it is inferior to it, lacking quite the same flexibility. So too, something like a social credit score, where how many likes or dislikes a person got somehow translated to the ability to acquire things, suffers from being like money, except most available to popular people, a way of strangling those who want to be off the beaten track, either by being unknown and isolated, or by holding unpopular views or stances, or even just not wearing the newest fashions. So we want to beware of money by another name, but at the same time we don't want to broaden the concept to the point of being meaningless. Money is a nicely liquid and mathematically easy way to
but he's
engage in
like 37
exchanges,
years
or even
old. He
monitor
didn't get his
inventories
speech
and
therapist till
production
he was
across
like
the
30.
board.
Till he was like
It also
32
lets you
years old.
often measure how effective or popular a given product
Oh, if you
or
listen to his
community
old
effort
videos
is,
just from a
as
couple
folks
years
select
ago,
to
it's
trade or
really
give
hard
funds to
to,
it.
like,
However, simply being a tool for counting or measuring is not money. If you have a million products all with different and changing values,
in his
rating
older
those
videos, he specifically tells you, I have a lisp.
I have a speech
I can hardly say R, and so
it's
this
cute,
is just
though.
what it is.
It's cute. Like, yo, I can only imagine how nerve-wracking when that's like the thing that you're the worst at is speaking, and then you get up there and speak. Like,
And that he said that shit too.
That's why I said I don't know who that is, but whoever it is, like, I really respect them because I can tell he put that.
Okay, he been doing this shit for 7 years, yo.
Like, I mean, I'm not saying it's the equivalent of learning a new
This
language,
video will
but
be
it's
covering
very
various types of
easy.
megastructures and artificial worlds and constructs, which you'll be familiar with from science or science fiction. We'll be covering everything from neo-low horizon orbital types, which might have a dozen or so people inside it, up to things the size of planets or even the size of solar systems, like a Dyson sphere. For that reason, we have an ad hoc classification system which we'll be using that roughly mirrors stellar classifications. We'll go over that in just a moment. First, though, let me...
What you say?
I said when it got a little bit later, was the turnout better?
No, because they didn't put it on the fucking map.
I mean, I didn't see
No dollar value is handier than...
And that's what I asked, like, after, because First Friday is normally 6 to 9. That's why when I did my show on First Friday, it's 6 to 9. That's why when I was at the toy, everything downtown, everybody, Alpha, everybody does 6 to 9.
Right.
So that's why I was like, oh, from 4 to 6, like, that's too early for First Friday, for one. And then Jane got the email, and she was like, oh, yeah, we're not supposed to be out there setting up until 5. I'm like, yeah, that makes more sense, because shit don't really start till 6. So at, like, 7 o'clock, I looked at Jane, I was like, yo, is this on the map? She's like, what? I'm like, on the First Friday map. She's like, nope. I'm like, ain't nobody gonna come out here yet.
That's why. But even the other vendors that were there, like, I seen the lady who was, like, she was part of the prison team. And, like, it was cool to see them, but, like, there was, like, no promotion, and unless you were really, like, walking around.
Measuring each and total every other one, but this is simply a sign
there was
of
a guy out there selling
no
cookies
different
and
than
stuff, and I wanted to
measuring
support
mass
him
or
because this
weight
shit
in
looked so
kilograms or
good.
pounds.
You seen the guy?
Its length or height
I
in
didn't
feet or
leave my
meters,
area.
its brightness in candle equivalent watts and so on.
I'm not out there to socialize.
You have specifically declared a dollar
Yeah, they
for
just didn't have a lot of. They had like a drawer maker, somebody named Keith that was like an older white man that did art. He was like a painter or something, but he did.
So a civilization that holds a vote on whether or not to approve someone's atypical request, a solid gold house or a giant spaceship to use a porcelain yacht, for instance, could not be said to have their votes translate to money equivalents. On the other hand, you presumably need some way to measure how much resources they have on hand and what their incoming flow was to be decided if they could approve the 1,000 big requests they got that year, and also how to rank them by the effort of resource years, and possibly by how much that person or persons making the request
that's why nobody really wanted to do it.
or willing to promise not to ask them down the road.
They were doing like their own.
In other words, a means of measuring debt. However, this is not automatically money. Even in these setups, it will be near as enough as to make
And then I
no
put my
difference.
time down as 7:30 till 6 for yesterday, and I was out that bitch till fucking 7:30. So I got to get an extra hour and a half on my time when I redo my fucking time sheet.
And the time it occupies the replicator performing that service.
I'm
And
not
that
going to
matter
work
might
next
not
week.
even matter, since you can presumably tell the machine that its next task is making a copy of itself. This isn't a story or game after all that needs a rule about not asking the genie for 1,000,000 wishes as your first wish. In that case, all that matters is if the process is causing a permanent loss of mass and energy, and how much. We all have units for mass, energy, and time. Something which is exactly identical to one of those is not money. And I'd further justify that by looking at what such a civilization would be like, something Charles Strauss examined in his novel Singularity Sky. If you've got a machine that can make anything, indeed which might not even be bound by conservation of energy, or the laws of thermodynamics for all we know, then it's a little hard to figure out how such a society would even operate, let alone how its economy should work, given that supply and demand are key to that. A hive mind, like the Borg from Star Trek, has plenty of interactions, and also presumably keeps detailed inventories and analysis of its resources and expenditures, and how efficient those are. But it's not using money or doing economics. By this same reasoning, then, we could say a civilization where everyone has identical or near-identical goals does not need money either. Note, by identical goals, we can't be ignoring individuality here, since two people with the goal of personal survival very much do not have identical goals any more than the cat and mouse or spider and fly do. However, if we are contemplating the classic super enlightened society we often see in science fiction, what are often called as space elves, then they might generally not need currency for the same reason a hive mind does not. None of them have any conflicting and competing ambitions and goals. We could also argue that a society that so rarely had conflicting or competing objectives, and those minimal and easily resolved by some process of arbitration, is not using money either. Just a side note, as we go through these kinds of examples, there are all going to be bits that stick out as aha moments. Like when I said arbitration, I imagine many of you thought, courts arbitrate, but you have to hire a lawyer or pay them from the public coffers. And free lawyers appointed by the state are not as good as some expensive legal team. And that's certainly true. However, folks by and large do not like the idea that success of one's cases should hinge on how much lawyering you can buy. So a post-scarcity civilization might decide to take things a step further and use an AI or have every advocate randomly assigned to each dispute, like judges and juries usually are. Of course, unless your lawyer is one of those incorruptible, devoted-to-duty space elves, the only incentive that advocate had then for doing a good job is reputation. And while that might be enough, that also raises another common example of money by another name, in this case, your social reputation. Now, reputation is not the same as money, but has a lot of parallels, and a lot of modern marketing is just reputation building for a brand name. It is also critical to exchanges in small groups like tribes or clans, where favors and social status are the primary currency, though again that's getting a bit broad with the term money. Reputation is also hard to do math and accounting with, though many a marketing firm would love to be able to change that. It's probably worth asking if that is fair, though, if we really should just be using those broadest definitions for money in contemplating a society without it. And to that I just say your mileage may vary. We have no universal definition of money, and nobody has some exclusive right to set that definition either. Nobody anointed a given dictionary or economics professor the exclusive right to set an ironclad definition across our time, languages, and cultures for what is and is not money, or any other term for that matter. So if someone wants to use a definition so broad that it would include an accounting chart for interfamily activities and exchanges, then I can't say that's wrong. Nor could I say it was wrong if someone wanted to limit that definition specifically only to voluntary exchanges of goods and services between entities. I just point out that in the former, you now need to be able to justify a parent hugging their kid as an economic transaction, and in the latter, you presumably need to be justifying paying taxes as a voluntary exchange, which requires some caution so you don't accidentally also include getting mugged as a voluntary exchange. For today's purposes, we will assume there is some definition of money in there which is not so broad as to include every human exchange of any kind, nor so restrictive it starts ignoring obvious examples of money. We also bypass systems too small or primitive to bother with creating a medium of exchange and accounting. For instance, you can argue many civilizations did not have money, they had barter. And this is true, but hardly indicative of some great enlightenment, but rather of just not having developed currency as a technology or practice yet. A chieftain or warlord rolls up to your village gate demanding 50 wagon loads of grain or he'll torch your town down. That's not enlightened by any standard other than maybe the Klingons. And I don't think him demanding a signed promissory note for the grain, or its equivalent in other goods, alters the morality, merely the sophistication. I hate to keep picking on Star Trek, but in it the Federation is said to have no money, while folks like the captains are regularly shown to have far more influence, resources, and power than the average person. We are told that humanity has evolved beyond accumulating things, to quote Picard in the episode The Neutral Zone, talking to a stockbroker who had been frozen for centuries and revived.
A lot has changed in the past 300 years. People are no longer obsessed with the accumulation of things. We've eliminated hunger, want, the need for possessions. We've grown out of our infancy.
And yet we see Picard, and everyone else, repeatedly valuing things and having prized possessions. And I'm also not sure what that cultural growth is, to be less driven by greed, when you have holodecks and replicators and abundant clean energy. But isn't it possible someone else would value Picard's original copy of Moby Dick enough to steal it? Also, the writers never specify what that growth was, and it could be pretty sinister, like brain implants or genetic modification to make them less greedy or ambitious or self-interested. However, this access to abundance is critical to the concept. They are clearly a post-scarcity civilization, and this is one where there's just so much abundance there's no need to compete for basic survival needs, which a cynic might argue makes having ethics cheaper. Their morality costs them nothing. There are plenty of things that just represent desirable items that can't be subject to post-scarcity, fame, prestige, unique items, and so on. Here, though, is where Picard's comment needs a second look. Because while it's obviously acknowledged that they don't need to struggle with each other for basic survival goods, food and medicine and such, and there's no grocery store selling food anywhere, any more than we have stores for ale or encyclopedias anymore, he doesn't say they don't have things they desire and strive for. Instead, he says, people are no longer obsessed with the accumulation of things. This is probably the critical aspect for contemplating how we could actually have a functioning society without money. You got to change how folks behave, and to do that, you have to change how they think, which is where various forms of alteration to human education, genetics, and so on might play a role, sinister or enlightened, edifying or indoctrination. But we also need to ask what things people were accumulating and now are not, given that we have already noticed the various crew members accumulated plenty of stuff, and they also clearly value personal comfort. It is horribly oversimplistic and a false dichotomy to say human desires classify as strictly physical and material or intellectual and spiritual, and that the latter is inherently better in all cases. And presumably Trek doesn't think so either, though it probably depends on which writer you ask. Humans do have certain primary focuses, though. There's a lot of disagreement about what those are and how to classify them. The classic 7 deadly sins of pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and sloth, along with their polar opposite virtues, is one example. We have many versions of that outline and many parallel examples. Let's borrow from a more modern and somewhat controversial one, Moral Foundations theory, which offers 6 critical values humans tend to have. Those are care versus harm, fairness versus cheating, loyalty versus betrayal, authority versus subversion, sanctity versus degradation, and liberty versus oppression. And to show some obvious conflicts on priorities, we obviously think it wrong to inflict pain or hardship on someone or leave them in pain, care versus harm, but we will use them as punishment in fairness versus cheating or justice value, and we often measure someone's nominal sanctity or purity by how much they've voluntarily suffered or sacrificed to maintain that purity. You could also have a civilization that absolutely valued fairness at sporting games, but applauded trickery or cheating in other games or in war, bluffing at poker or ambushing an enemy. So while a culture might be obsessed with one of these values over another, they might also have a pretty broad spectrum of how, when, and what flavor they were obsessed with. I have no idea which of these the Federation valued and when. It's a fictional universe of many different authors. Though I'd be curious in the comments which ones you thought the Star Trek Federation of Planets focused on, compared to, say, the Romulans or Klingons. But the Klingons clearly like to accumulate things. Only for them, it's mostly martial victories and the appearance of honor. An advantage of a post-scarcity society is that you probably can get away with having 99% of your population be warriors, too, especially given that it doesn't imply it is either a full-time job or interferes with learning other skills. But we couldn't say that a civilization focused on honor, as opposed to personal purity, doesn't have a potential need for money. Even ignoring that both might be quantities based on other people's opinions, and thus subject to marketing or bribery, it is obviously easier to win many victories with a bunch of warships and combat troops, or to keep yourself pure by hiring others to do all your farming or clean, or less undesirable tasks which might taint you. What do they value? Because it is probably fair to point out that economics and money are not limited to trading widgets and material goods. They are the exchange of valued things for each other with relative values determined through supply and demand. We already discussed how broadly we should define money today, though, and so we can say the Federation could still have stuff they valued and exchange around without specifically needing money. If someone is a teacher who prizes knowledge and respect, and a student comes to them offering respect and asking for knowledge, that is certainly an exchange, but it is not money. But those 6 values, or 7 deadly sins, or whichever, are important because a culture could, through indoctrination or genetic alteration or surgery, presumably remove or prune down how much people wanted of such a value or to commit such a deadly sin. Of course, you can also correct needs for these by sheer technological abundance. So let's imagine a civilization like the Federation where you really need not worry about where food, water, and electricity were coming from, or any random widget. Either they are dirt cheap or supplied by government with replicators, 3D printers, and vast fusion-powered hydroponic growth labs where robots harvest food and spin your clothes and so on, actually needs to be bought or traded. They are a democracy and meritocracy where most folks are highly educated and community-minded. So where volunteers aren't drawn to a task, they probably would have no problem with conscription instead of taxation. That's a classic approach in places where trade and coinage haven't really formalized and stabilized. All the small landholders owe their feudal lord X number of days per year of service, and by and large you can rely on their personal ethics, pride, and sense of honor to tackle an assigned task with enthusiasm. Robots help with that too, because if you drew the short straw and are assigned the worst job around, you don't have to clean the town sewers, just supervise the robots doing it. Amusingly, a moneyless society operating on this principle might view sloth as their new worst problem over greed, and suggest some evaluation system of work along with rewards and prizes. You want to avoid sloth and seek to do so by appealing to greed, pride, gluttony, or lust for that matter. To put it tactfully, many a young man who volunteers to help with a popular cause is often suspected by his peers of hoping to become more popular with the young ladies by doing so. On that topic, same as we might contemplate eliminating money, it is not hard to imagine a future civilization is one where culture and policy have little to do with romantic motivations because everyone is glutted on virtual reality, sex bots, and emotional support bots, or in some way satisfies other needs, or limits or removes other needs. Which is one way to be without money, just create a society that can easily produce basic physical needs and strongly disapproves the desire for anything else. On the flip side, a hyper-individualistic society might be one without money too. Let us imagine that by the year 3000 AD, we have invented reliable and non-rebellious artificial intelligences, cheaply abundant power like compact fusion or matter-to-energy converters, gotten very good with automation and nanotechnology, and have very good 3D printers and life extension technology. And even assuming we still had patent laws, pretty much every technology or copyrighted bit of entertainment from a century earlier till back to now was public domain and fit on a hard drive you could put in your pocket. Anybody who wants has the ability to jump on a spaceship and fly off to any corner of the galaxy with a tank full of fuel, virtual reality utopias, and 3D printers and automated food production and maintenance, and medical facilities for 1 million years before needing to refuel. A refueling that could be done at any of 10 trillion minor planets with a bit of raw material or ice. They certainly might have plenty of reasons for folks to interact and exchange, but it is really hard to imagine how a formal currency would continue to exist, especially on the outskirts for those folks who basically left because they wanted to be away from civilization. Time lag is also a real issue for maintaining currencies between star systems. You almost have to have a powerful overbody dictating the value of the currency everywhere and when, so that you could trust the money used to buy something 100 light years away will still purchase it when your cash arrives. Barring that, you probably have to shift to a commodity currency, where some specific item like gold or hydrogen or such is the money. That's doable, but probably could only be reliable if technology had plateaued, since commodity currencies are so vulnerable to any big shift in availability. Raw elements like gold or platinum or hydrogen are fairly universal at the interstellar scale, so Galactic Empire is not subject to having its gold standard or hydrogen dollar collapse in value from a sudden discovery of a large new supply. But it is still vulnerable to disruptive technologies. The device that makes extracting precious deuterium for fusion reactors from gas giants 10 times easier, or opening a new source, like letting you pull it from stars, or blowing up an entire hydrogen economy by inventing a black hole power generator. Now, realistically, there is a point where either your technology does plateau, in which case a commodity currency is more viable, or your technology has just kept snowballing the way it's been doing in recent centuries, until you have godlike powers that permit individuals options even a post-scarcity civilization couldn't dream of offering. That's certainly another option for a society without money. Presumably a civilization of demigods does not need money either. If you tend to subscribe to the notion that humanity's eventual fate is something along those lines, like the Q from Star Trek or the Ascended Beings from Stargate, or many other sci-fi stories, then that would seem like one where money wouldn't be in play, though even there you might still have an informal currency of favors owed and gambling debts paid. So that's some of the more abstract paths to maybe not having money. One last one for the day. It is entirely possible a civilization with good enough robotics might put a super-intelligent AI or group of them in charge of making sure everything was supplied, and give it some algorithm for achieving optimum distribution of needs and arbitrating and prioritizing conflicting or large requests. I'm not sure I would want to live under such an AI's thumb, even if it was benevolent and competent. But whether I would like that or not, it is probably a doable setup and one that would not require a currency. This is something we looked more in our episode, Machine Overlords and Post-Scarcity Societies. I suppose as a whole, the takeaway from today is that most of the suggested methods for going moneyless probably do not quite work out in practice, and maybe aren't as desirable as they sound like, but that they probably could be made to work if folks wanted it enough, or if their culture was different enough, like a hive mind or ascended beings, or ultra-individualistic post-scarcity loners, that it simply didn't serve a role for them. Fundamentally, though, the galaxy is a big place and offers us billions of worlds to try things out on. So I suspect we will see many try various approaches to going without money, and time will tell how successful or viable that might be. I mentioned earlier how everybody has a different idea of a utopian future world and wants to create that world, even if just in their mind or a novel. And I also mentioned how certain technological paths, in combination with certain social ones, for good or ill, might result in people getting to assign points to various traits for themselves or their kids, like we see with various point-based systems in role-playing games, both video game versions and classic pen and paper ones. I played my fair share of both down the years, and tried my hand at writing fiction too. Based on the comments on the show down the years, I know it's a pretty popular sort of hobbies with all of you too. If you do enjoy world building, either for writing fiction or running games or just daydreaming, then you know a lot of the development time and mental energy gets burned up just trying to organize your notes and build the framework. And there's been a ton of attempts at making aids and creative development tools down the years. But most of them had a steep and foggy learning curve or not really provided anything much better than pen and paper and maybe a word processor and paint program do. I was amazed by Word Anvil. It's overflowing with tools that help you with world building, and while it is also quite intuitive to use, they have a big arsenal of tutorial videos that lets you quickly create and easily organize all the ideas going through your head. And if you're running an RPG, of making it easily accessible and clearly understandable to your player. Word Anvil, the award-winning world-building toolset, lets you quickly create settings and flush them out to very deep and interactive levels, everything from leaving notes on maps and smaller maps to alternate timeline tracking for your world's history. Whether you're managing a campaign or writing a novel, whether you're making a city or dungeon maps or family genealogy, whether it's sci-fi or fantasy genres, Word Anvil lets you forge your setting better and easier than anything I've ever worked with before. And it has a free version so you can share it with others, and selectively so they're not seeing secret content. And you can also incorporate ways to monetize your content, such as Patreon or Ko-fi or your own storefront. It offers Wikipedia-like articles for your world setting, interactive maps, timeline, an RPG campaign manager, and a full novel writing software. All the tools you'll need to run your RPG campaign or write your novel and never lose your notes again. If you'd like to give Word Anvil a try and that'll help you forge new worlds, just click the link in this episode's description.
You said what?
That wraps us up for September, but we'll jump right into October by asking how, in a vast empire of countless trillions, someone could stand out. Then, on October 14th, we'll ask how we might feed all those folks as we look at the future of farming in the next few decades and beyond. Then we'll have our October Sci-Fi Sunday episode, Sentient Planets and World Consciousness, on October 17th, to discuss the popular sci-fi idea of living and thinking worlds, and that they might occur naturally or be created by high-tech civilization. Then we'll take a look at the concept of convergent evolution, aliens who look or act like us, and then artificial intelligence who might also act like some of us, the misbehaving ones, with a look at criminal AI. Now, if you want to make sure you get notified when those episodes come out, make sure to subscribe to the channel and click the notifications bell, which you might want to do again if you already have, as a lot of folks have been telling me and other creators that they're not getting notified about new episodes by YouTube anymore, of shows they've been watching for years. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit the like button and share it with others. If you'd like to help support future episodes, you can donate to us on Patreon or our website, isaacarthur.net. And Patreon and our website are linked in the episode description below. along with all of our various social media forums, where you get updates and chat with others about the concepts of the episode and many other futuristic ideas. Until next time, thanks for watching, and have a great week.
And the lie has, in fact, led us so far away from a normal society that you cannot even orient yourself any longer. Dense, gray fog, not even one pillar can be seen. Lying has always been used for political purposes. Lies cover up corruption, past mistakes, and hidden motives, and they are an essential ingredient in political campaigning. However, political lies take on a much more sinister form. The lies become all-encompassing, embrace all aspects of life, and infect every corner of society. This occurrence is a sign that totalitarianism may be rising, for as the political philosopher Hannah Arendt noted, totalitarianism, at its essence, is an attempt at transforming reality into fiction. It is the attempt of corrupt and pathological state actors to impose a fictional account of the world onto the entire population. See Germany, it was the idea of a superior race and an unclean people that formed the big lie. Viet Union, it was the belief that state communism could work and that all could be made equal. And from the big lie trickled down a stream of endless little lies. Referring to communist Russia, Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote, "In our country, the lie has become not just a moral category, but a pillar of the state." Describing Czechoslovakia under Soviet rule, Václav Havel similarly stated, "Life in the system is so thoroughly permeated with hypocrisy and lies. Because the regime is captive to its own lies, it must falsify everything. It falsifies the past, it falsifies the present, and it falsifies the future. It falsifies statistics. A political system rests upon a bed of lies. What can be done to turn the tide back towards truth and freedom?" In this video, drawing from the insights of Alexander Solzhenitsyn and Václav Havel, we are going to explore this question. The day before he was exiled from the Soviet Union, Alexander Solzhenitsyn published a short essay titled "Live Not by Lies," and in it he wrote, "We are approaching the brink. A universal spiritual demise upon us. A physical one is about to flare up and engulf us and our children, while we continue to smile sheepishly and babble. But what can we do to stop it? We haven't the strength. Can do everything, even if we comfort and lie to ourselves that this is not so. Not they who are guilty of everything, but we ourselves. State turns totalitarian, the individuals who live in these societies are not merely its victims. All the totalitarian regimes of the 20th century rose to power amidst thunderous applause, as many citizens openly called for the brutal control that defines this form of rule. Mass support and compliance, the minority and the ruling class would be but paper tigers. The responsibility for the oppression, suffering, and loss of life that comes in the wake of totalitarianism, therefore, cannot be placed exclusively on politicians and bureaucrats. A large portion of responsibility must be placed on the citizens who support this form of rule, or else do nothing to resist. Václav Havel explains in his book, The Power of the Powerless. Obviously something in human beings